Firewalk, the developers behind Concord, have been shut down. Sony tried to do what they could to save Concord, but the patient didn't make it off the operating table. Now, you might have already seen that news. What's really interesting is the reasons behind it and the fact that Sony is going to be blaming the closure of Firewalk, the failure of Concord, as the reason that they're not going to pursue any new IP, as said in the letter by Herman Hulst, the internal email sent out to the employees at SIE. So they're going to continue chasing live services, they're going to continue making mobile games, and to top it all off, no new IP. So hopefully this is going to be a pretty short video. By the way, hi, I'm Mug. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome back. All the usual stuff. If you find the information here informative, entertaining, remember to hit the like button, helps out the video. Now, the first thing to keep in mind here is that they decided there was no way to save Concord, that it wasn't even worth the minimum try. I already made a video talking about how Sony was probably not going to let Concord go. Too big of an investment to get literally zero return from it when there were other options that they could explore for, at least compared to the game's budget, a low price. And now I'm very sad because we missed the opportunity of having Concord flop twice. That would have been so good. And that really should put in perspective how unsavable they considered Concord to be. Which makes sense. I think it's the sensible decision. Concord was beyond saving. It would have probably flopped twice. So hey, 1 point for Sony. They actually made a decent decision on this one. Because as we've established before, yeah, they could have invested some money into converting the game into free-to-play, which would have taken some effort, but taken the bones of what was there. And hey, I'm gonna be honest, I still think that they're keeping the game around internally. There's still stuff that they can salvage there regarding the engine or weapons or assets or whatever, trust me. But they did come to the logical conclusion that even if they did do all of the effort of making the game free to play or something like that, it still doesn't have a functioning game mode. It doesn't have a hook. It doesn't have something that would make people want to play it even if it were free. And they wisely, I hope, looked at the data that showed that when the game was free during the open beta period, nobody cared anyways. So it just goes to show you that this is probably the biggest waste of money in the history of video games, maybe? Let's be honest, $400 million when it comes to everything regarding production of Concord, to have it exist for 2 weeks, close it down, and not be able to salvage anything, to at least they didn't fall into the sunk cost fallacy and keep investing in the game. Again, there wasn't going to be a redemption arc, but it would have been funny if they tried. And so I wanted to ask you for a favor, in honor of all of us who did play Concord, who did put our hours into the game, just to tell you how bad it was. A moment of silence. That was enough. Let's continue. So Herman Hulst was the one to rip off the band-aid, to give the information to people, tell us, hey, we tried everything we could and it didn't work out. We couldn't do it. We couldn't pull it off. He says that certain aspects of Concord were exceptional, but others did not land with enough players. That's the understatement of the century. And as a result, we took the game offline. We have spent considerable time these past few months exploring all our options, which is, something we have evidence of, all of the updates that have been going on in the background. The active players for Concord still exist. And I just want to point out that I love the language here. We have determined the best path forward is to permanently sunset the game. They can't say we decided to chuck it in the trash or something, so they gotta say sunset. But the really important thing comes with the PvP first-person shooter genre is a competitive space that's continuously evolving, and unfortunately, we did not hit our targets with this title. We will take the lessons learned from Concord and continue to advance our live service capabilities to deliver future growth in this area. So remember, Sony still has 4 more live service games. The next one is FairGames, which is a first-person shooter, an extraction type of game. I saw somebody in my comments compare it to Hood, and I think that's a good way of looking at it. That's the one by Jade Raymond, and 3 other ones that we don't know, and they're taking the lessons from Concord into those active projects, or into a new one. Exciting. But the kicker really comes from, I am a big believer in benefits of embracing creative experimentation and developing new IP. However, growing through sustainable financials, especially in a challenged economic environment, is critical. So for those of you who aren't fluent in corporate, what this means is, right now we can't afford to invest in new IPs except if they are live services, because we already invested in those, and the return on investment in those games is too high for us to ignore. However, when it comes to our standard ways of operating, don't expect us to make any new single-player IP anytime soon, because we need to put all hands on deck into established games that we know are going to be a hit, and therefore we need them to be tied to IP that are already successful. And that's a really important thing to highlight here. They're not saying that they're not making any new IP. They are still moving forward with their live service games. Potentially, if anything, they're going to retool something that they have in the works to make it fit with an existing IP, but they are still moving forward with the live service games. They make that very clear here. We're taking these lessons moving forward for our next endeavors, and they do want to prioritize that. It's just that also financially sustainable. Gotta make sure that we focus on IP people like. This also comes with news that I think a lot of us care less about, but it does matter, especially to the employees there. They also shut down Neon Koi. Neon Koi was a German-Finnish studio, previously called Savage, and they were working on a AAA mobile game. Sony picked them up, rebranded them to Neon Koi. The CEO and other talent left the studio, which for a lot of people was, this isn't going anywhere, this looks pretty bad. And hey, end of the day, they decided to close it down. No more for that specific project, but Sony is very clear that even though they're closing down Neon Koi, mobile remains a priority growth area for the studio business. We are in a very early stage of our mobile efforts. To achieve success in this area, we need to concentrate on titles that are in line with PlayStation Studios' pedigree and have the potential to reach more players globally. Which, again, reading between the lines is saying that the game just wasn't up to the Sony pedigree. At least I read it that way. Maybe this is a bit of a stretch. I don't feel like it, but basically it wasn't going to have that global appeal, and it didn't have the PlayStation seal of quality that we all recognize from their great games like Concord. And that's kind of it. It's a wrap. I think this news is really sad, not because of Concord. I mean, in a way, thank God that Concord is gone. The entertainment value of watching it fail again. I mean, it would have been funny. Some jokes are funnier the second time around. That's just a fact. But I don't know if this one would have been. Would have depended on the punchline, I guess, to keep the analogy going. It really proves that this is the biggest flop we've ever seen, like the biggest failure when it comes to an investment, to a new IP, to a project being done at this scale. It's just a ridiculous budget from what a lot of people still, even today, after I would say a series of fumbles, Sony, one of the best studios, one of the best publishers associated frequently with top quality stuff. And on top of all of that, the way that they are painting the future of Sony Studios in this email is that we're going to see more live services as they try and not have another Concord. And when it comes to creativity in the single player projects that I think most people associate with Sony, don't expect anything new. At least I'm glad we got Astro Bot before this cutoff. I guess that's now an existing IP. Maybe we can still get an Astro Bot game. Anyways, I guess I'm taking all of my Concord footage and putting it into a drive and hugging it to sleep tonight or something. I knew Concord was going to be a huge disaster the moment it was announced. I knew it even more the moment I played it. It's actually all documented on this very channel. But I never thought it was going to be this. I think this was something nobody really imagined. It caught us all by surprise, and it's definitely one of the biggest stories of this year. There's a lot to take in from it about the industry, about greed, about hubris, about toxic positivity, about being way too late to parties, about just bad game design. And no, I'm not even talking about the characters at this point. I'm just saying that the game didn't have a core game mode, my guy. Like, seriously. I have no doubt that some of the people that worked at Firewalk deserved this failure, especially if those claims of toxic positivity are true. But for what it's worth, for the people who were there and believed in a dream, for the people who were fighting for this game to be worth it, who, when they brought up criticism, they were told that that's not accepted in this house. To the people within Firewalk that I'm confident existed and had the best of intentions at heart, who probably brought up many of the issues that we did long before the game released, my heart goes out to you. Please know you made an incredibly competent game. The biggest issues with Concord were high-level design stuff. You know, nobody that wasn't in a director's chair could fix. Stuff like those character designs, stuff like not having those game modes, stuff like just it being a misguided venture from the start. Hope you land on your feet. Hope you get to work on projects that are worth working on and you make something that people enjoy and play in the future. However, to all of the yes men, to all of the people who allowed this to happen, to the people who thought this game was good and was too big to fail, and ended up coming out with this just mediocre, forgettable game, I doubt that the people with influence here are going to be out of a job. They're probably going to land fine. They're probably even going to stay within Sony. Please learn from these mistakes and don't repeat them, because there was a ton of money and a ton of potential here that you guys ended up throwing into the garbage. Years of people's lives, and sure, they had their rents paid, their life was stable working on this or whatever, but we would all be much happier, including those people, if the game that had come out was something worth remembering, or at least worth remembering for very, very different reasons. I've been Mug. Thank you so much for watching. I know a lot of you got to know the channel through my coverage of Concord. It's kind of the end of an era to a certain extent. It's wild. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you for pretty much everything else that happens in games, and I hope to do a good job with it. It was a pleasure to live this with all of you guys, just as it was a pleasure to live it with the members of the $1 patron wall. It's called that way because there's only one tier, $1, but they support everything that I do, and I am eternally grateful to them for that. So thank you. Redesign is coming soon. Okay, I'm doing what I can. Just got home from work. All right. Thank you. As always, I'll see you again very soon.